How about this? The U.S. Park Police are...
Let's start by storming Blackgate!
What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. This is of course part of a series where I focus on a specific director and rank that director's work from worst to best. I've done such directors in the past such as David Lynch, David Fincher, Wes Anderson, Spike Lee, Spike Jonze. The list goes on. You guys can check that on my playlist down below. But guys, obviously clicked on this video so you know that this time around I'm focusing on James Mangold films and ranking them from worst to best. This is something that for many of you guys that have been subscribed to me, you guys have been requesting this for quite some time, and I've been saying that I'm going to get around to it, and truth be told, I wasn't lying. This was one of those directors that I wanted to do, but it was kind of hard to find some of his movies. But alas, I can honestly say a couple days ago, I saw the last of his movies, and here I am, November 2021, able to say that I finished it. So, James Mangold, guys, as many of you probably know, as of filming this video in November 2021, he's directed 11 films, so I'll be ranking his films from 11 being his worst to 1 being his best, and of course, my opinion. I know he's going to be doing the Indiana Jones 5. I think that's coming out in like July 2022. So it won't include that, obviously, because I'm filming this in November of 2021. But guys, enough exposition. Let's get started. So kicking things off with number 11, we have Kate and Leopold. This was a waste. This was a waste of a talented cast. It was quite disappointing in that it fell into a lot of cliches of the genre. Wasn't that romantic. Honestly, it was just kind of cringy. Yeah, I was not a fan of this movie, which is why it was my number 11. Next up, we have my number 10, which is, of course, Girl Interrupted. This is a movie that I do know has a lot of people really liking this movie. Like, I know a lot of people that like it, especially because of the performances. And the performances are good, for sure. No question about it. But I think where it falters is that a lot of the things that it tackles, I feel like I've seen in a lot of different kind of other movies focusing on this topic, such as like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And I can't lie, like watching Girl Interrupted, I especially was thinking about that movie, and I was like, well, I could just be watching that movie. So I just found myself kind of disconnected while watching this movie, and it just wasn't that interesting to boot, which is why, again, it's number 10. But again, I respect it if you like this movie, for sure. So that's my number 10. Next up, my number 9 is Identity. So Identity is definitely a good example of a movie that is rock solid until it gets to a twist. And the twist really kind of, honestly, deflates the attention to the details. Because the movie is definitely detail-oriented until you get to that last 5 minutes. And then it's like, okay, so it really wasn't, I suppose. Because it just is a twist that, it's not that it's from left field. It's just a twist that you kind of think about and you're like, well, if they do that, it's just going to make things not make sense. And sure enough, they went with it. And yeah, it kind of just ruins the rest of the movie. And that if you then rewatch it, you're kind of like, yeah, but like, that doesn't make sense. So the whole movie's a red herring? What? I'm just saying, Identity, it's a movie that I think it's entertaining until it's not. When you get to that twist ending, and you'll know it when you see it, it just really kind of makes everything that happened before feel purposeless instead of purposeful, which, again, given all the details in the filmmaking, you would think that that wouldn't be the case, but alas, here we are. So yeah, Identity is my number 9. Next up, my number 8 is The Wolverine, which, can't lie, The Wolverine has a lot of similar problems to Identity. Similar to Identity, it starts off strong. It's a rock-solid movie until it gets to a third act, where the third act definitely falters. It has a twist that very predictable, more predictable than Identity for sure. In addition to that, it also has action that towards the end just wasn't that interesting. And characters just do things just because. Why not? Especially with that villain reveal. Holy cow. Which ties into the twist, but it just didn't rub me the right way. But it has some good things going on throughout the movie. Like, again, you have Hugh Jackman's lead performance. You have the bullet train scene. Now, this is a movie I haven't seen in 8 years. I'm not going to lie. I haven't seen in 8 years. I've never wanted to revisit it because, again, that third act really left a sour taste in my mouth. But I think I like it a bit more than Identity simply because, again, we have a good Hugh Jackman performance. We have some rock-solid filmmaking. Then, again, that, obviously bullet train scene, it's good stuff. But, again, it's a little bit better than Identity in my opinion. But that is why it's my number 8. Next up, my number 7, we have Night and Day, Tom Cruise, and, of course, Cameron Diaz. Holy cow, these two are really good together. I think that they did a good job with this movie. Their chemistry is palpable. The action is convincing with both of them. Obviously, they did their own stunts. And in addition to that, the action scenes, because they're doing their own stunts, definitely have a more realistic feel to it, whilst at the same time having that tongue-in-cheek feel, if that makes sense. James Mangold's directing here is definitely slick for sure. And I also like that he does a really good job, honestly, of going in between genres, and he's very flexible in that regards. And Night and Day, it's not good per se, but it definitely was entertaining and definitely left a smile on my face when I saw it the couple times I did. And that is why it's my number 7. Next up, we have my number 6, which, as I mentioned earlier in this video, there were a couple movies that I had a difficult time tracking, and that was definitely the case with my number 6, which is Heavy. So, as of the filming of this video, Heavy is on Netflix, and this was a movie that I had such a difficult time finding. I really did. I finally, just out of the blue, decided to look it up on Netflix, and sure enough, it was on there. I was genuinely surprised, and I was like, okay, I'm going to watch this, and I literally watched it that day because I was like, I don't know when this is going to leave. So, again, I don't know if it's still on Netflix. Even as of the filming of this video, I do think that it might be leaving soon, but hopefully down the line when I release this video, hopefully it will still be up, because Heavy, I definitely think, is worth your time. It has a very nuanced lead performance, in addition to also a supporting turn from Liv Tyler, who I believe this was one of her first roles, but the movie has really good acting. The movie also has atmosphere that feels palpable, and it's a movie that has drama that is very subtle in its approach, but it definitely is effective. It's not a good movie overall, per se. Like, it definitely has some issues for sure, but I like what it tackles, and I also like that it is very heavy in terms of the performances, and again, it's showcasing a life that I feel like we oftentimes don't really see too much of, similar to, like, Sling Blade. I definitely think that's probably a really good companion piece to Sling Blade, like the two combined. But yeah, I would say Heavy, definitely worth your time. That is why it's my number 6. Next up, my number 5, we have Copland, which I can't lie, going into this movie, I was not looking forward to in the slightest. This was actually the last movie of Mangold's that I saw before being able to say that I've seen all of his movies. And my friend Ryan Arcavich, shout out to you, he let me borrow the Blu-ray, and I'm glad that he did because I couldn't find this movie really anywhere, so it was a huge help that he did that. And I have to say, Copland, I went into, again, not really expecting much. I wasn't excited for it because, again, the title just really kind of made me think that it was going to be a pro-America kind of, movie, in addition to also just really praising the cops. And sure enough, 10 minutes in, I was like, well, this is why you don't judge a trailer or a premise, kids. This is why you go into a movie knowing pretty much nothing, so you can go in with an open mind. Because 10 minutes in, my expectations were definitely subverted. This is a movie that's honestly doing the opposite. It's tackling police corruption. And it does so in an interesting way. It's very engaging in that you have a lead performance in Sylvester Stallone that is very unique compared to everything else he's done. He even sounds a little bit different, which I really liked. And the other performances are good too. There is some action in it, and especially towards the end, I think that it works. This movie also is interesting in that it is very Western-esque. Like, I couldn't help but think about the third act. By the time we got to it, I was like, this feels like James Mangold wanted to do a cop thriller, but in the vein of a Western. I like that. And I think that, again, if you've seen a lot of Westerns, you'll probably pick that up. And I think that, for me personally, I couldn't help but grin when I realized that. It's a solid movie. I definitely think that it's worth your time. And that is why it is, of course, my number 5. Next up, my number 4, I think, is a rock-solid movie as well. My number 4 is, of course, Walk the Line. This has Joaquin Phoenix and Reese Witherspoon, and together they have stellar chemistry as well as incredible performances on their own right. The movie definitely has some things that kind of fall into the biopic formula, but again, the performances alone make this worth your time, as well as, again, the production design, costume design, and the soundtrack. Really good stuff there. Not my favorite of Mangold's, but I do think that it is definitely worth your time for the performances alone, and those performances are just so good. Joaquin Phoenix in particular, holy cow, what a performance. So definitely think Walk the Line. It is definitely worth your time. It is a rock-solid biopic, and again, it's worth your time, and that is why it's my number 4. Next up, my number 3 is Logan. Now, look, I know a lot of people are going to give me crap for saying this, but Logan, I think, is solid. I've seen Logan twice. I saw it once in theaters, and then a couple years after that, I did give it a second chance 2 years ago as we're filming this video. And the first time I thought it was solid. The second time I thought it was like rock solid. Like, I gave it an additional 0.25. So the first time I think it was like a 3.5, and then the second time I gave it a 3.75. I think it's very well filmed. I think it has a great lead performance of Hugh Jackman. Stellar visual effects, stellar production design, and honestly, a very fitting finale to the character of Logan. But I think where it falters is that the exposition feels a bit off at times. The pacing also really kind of falters, in my opinion. It feels a little bit too long. Now, although saying all of this, I will say that it is a movie that you would think I would love because I love Westerns, and I do think that superhero movies can be good. But it was weird for me to say that this movie was just solid because, again, it just seems like it has all the right ingredients of a movie for me to like. But I think that the fact of the matter is that it does fall into certain cliches of other movies. Like, this movie definitely has a road trip kind of feel to it in addition to all those other genres that I just mentioned. And the road trip aspect, I think, kind of ruins the pacing a little bit. But again, maybe I'll give this movie a third time. You know, maybe third time will be the charm down the line. But I know a lot of people that will probably have this as their number one, and I can respect that. I do respect this movie, but to an extent. I wanted to like it more than I did. And again, I did give it 2 chances. But, you know, again, maybe I'll give it a third time. But anyways, that's my number 3. Next up, my number 2 is, of course, Ford v Ferrari, starring Matt Damon, of course, Christian Bale, and what a film, guys. It's a crowd pleaser for sure, but I really like the score. I really like the racing scenes, the sound mixing, the visual effects. There's a lot to really honestly kind of sit back and be impressed by, but it's also a very engaging movie. It's very entertaining, and I think that the filmmaking, the entertainment value, the rewatchability value, all in itself to be higher than Logan. And I know a lot of people are going to roll their eyes and say, oh, Logan's a better movie, but from where I sit, I enjoyed Ford vs. Ferrari a bit more, and I also think that in terms of the filmmaking, Ford v Ferrari had a little bit more in terms of like what it was going for that I appreciated. Like, I feel like the sound mixing especially was very much so hard to do, but they really pulled it off in Ford v Ferrari, and I thought that it was more of an immersive experience because of such. Also, those performances, holy cow, really good stuff. But yeah, that's my number 2. Next up, my number 1, the one that you've probably guessed already, but my number 1, my favorite James Mangold film is 3:10 to Yuma. This was what really kind of got me on the page of James Mangold, because I think before this movie, I think the only one I really saw was Walk the Line and Identity. So I hadn't seen too many of his movies. Oh yeah, and Night and Day. So I guess I had seen a lot of his. But when I saw those movies, I didn't really know the name James Mangold. It wasn't until I saw 3:10 to Yuma where I looked at the director and I was like, I want to watch all this director's movies. And this was 5 years ago, June of 2016, when I first saw this movie. Actually, a friend of mine, shout out to Austin, he actually was the one that showed this movie to me. I'd been putting this movie off for years. I'd heard about it for quite some time. And again, as a fan of Westerns, I don't know why I was putting it off for so long, because once I finally saw it, I was like, holy cow, I can't get enough of this movie. And I saw it a bunch more. And obviously, I own it on 4K. I'll be watching it many more times. It's a really good movie. It tells a timeless classical story, but done so in a really stellar fashion in terms of the filmmaking. The execution is really good. And again, the rewatchability value is there. I love 3:10 to Yuma. If you've been sleeping on it, definitely would say give it a shot because it's really good. And again, this is like a straight up Western, obviously. So James Mangold, obviously, with all these other movies, to some way, shape, or form, he's kind of tackled a little bit of like Western themes throughout all these other movies. But this was him tackling it head on first, and I think he did a really good job with 3:10 to Yuma. That's why it's my number 1. But yeah, I'd like to talk about the director a little bit, obviously wrapping things up, guys. James Mangold, I think he's a rock-solid director. I really do appreciate and respect the fact that he's able to go through all these different genres and able to give like a unique style, a unique blend to it. I'm not a fan of all his movies. In fact, a decent amount of them, I do think that they are entertaining but kind of fall flat towards the end or just a straight-up disappointment. But he also has a lot of other movies that I do like, and I think that they kind of outweigh the, more negative experiences. And I think that he's a director that I greatly respect, and I would definitely recommend you check out all his movies because he is a director that definitely is intriguing with the movies that he picks. I'm curious to see what he'll do with Indiana Jones 5. We'll see how that turns out. But anyways, guys, again, that's my ranking for James Mangold. Let me know your ranking of James Mangold's films down below. And as always, don't forget the subscription, notification bell, and I'll catch you guys later.